It's a great honor to introduce and welcome Peter Ornich from Washington, D.C., from the United States. He's an AI engineer and linguist, and he was also working for Google for Google Translate project. Thank you very much for coming. Stage is yours.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation, for having me here. It's wonderful to be here in Košice, which is the part of the world that my family is from, and it's just great to be back in Slovakia finally after so long. I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Petr Orenic. I was born near Washington, D.C. My family was originally from Slovakia and Poland. They were Rusyns, Lemkos, and we lost the language, unfortunately, our community in the United States, and now we're trying to revitalize it. In Slovakia, and not knowing Rusyn, the language, and I felt like I couldn't connect with people like the way I wanted. And if I could create AI to do this, it would be a revolution for me personally, and I hope for the wider community. And today, I'm here to share that with you. That revolution is here. Now, everyone here, I think, knows why this is important. We're in Košice. We're in an area with a lot of regional and indigenous languages. Hungarian is a big minority language here. Rusyn is a big minority language here. Romani is a big minority language here. This area is a very important place for the revitalization of endangered and indigenous languages. So I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak. But for those of us, there's an interesting argument, which is life is hard enough. You go to the United States to work, you learn English, your kids learn English. Why make your life harder by trying to keep a small regional language alive in your home when you're working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, like Andy Warhol's parents were. Andy Warhol was from this area. So, and Andy Warhol's family, I believe, did not keep the language. And I get that argument, that part of being an adult, part of adulting, as millennials will say, is speaking the language of the country you're in. That's true. You're in England. Your life is going to be better and more comfortable if you speak English. However, the idea I'd like to propose today, that I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone here, is that your life is going to get a lot worse if you lose your indigenous language. If you switch from Rusyn to English, or Slovak, and you forget Rusyn, the community is going to suffer. There's going to be consequences, and these consequences are very well documented by the science. The science is very clear here, that if you lose your heritage language, there's going to be pain. And what's interesting about human life is we're kind of motivated by two forces, pain and pleasure. And I'm here to start off with the pain that we can avoid by keeping our language if we speak it, or by learning it if we don't speak it. So without further ado, we'll do the pain before the gain. So we always see that when there's a problem between generations, when the transmission of knowledge and information is disrupted, you're going to have lots of social problems. And language is going to be a symptom of that. The language is going to be lost. But it can also be a cause, which is a new idea I'll propose to you. Every 3 months, according to some estimates, a language is lost. So this problem is quite urgent and quite widespread. When they say the language is lost, that means there's no more speakers of it. It's dead, like Latin. So this problem is very urgent and very widespread. That was an estimate by in 2022. There's about 6,000 odd languages in the world, so we're losing them at a rapid pace. I don't want to be alarmist, though. You know, it's not the end of the world, but it is compounding challenges everyone faces. By the way, at the top, I translated this into Rusyn, which is the local language we're revitalizing, using my artificial intelligence. So I just want to show that we can use these tools to revitalize the language here. This is already into Rusyn from English, using the tool I'm going to show you guys. So let's talk about language loss and community health. We can talk about feelings and subjective stuff. However, what I like about medical documentation is it's very black and white, very numbers-based. You can't fake this data. So these are real studies by real doctors, by real statisticians that we're going to be discussing today. The first is the use of illicit substances. And a lot of studies have shown that when language transmission is broken, that when people are not speaking their heritage language, the use of illegal substances goes up. And this is very well documented. So people who think, for example, in America, that they're giving their children an advantage by only teaching them English, might want to reconsider that, because when the children lose the language, they're also going to be more at risk for the use of illegal drug use, illegal substance use. Next, which is interesting, is diabetes, which is a disease where the levels of blood sugar are too high because the insulin levels are non-existent or too low. And interestingly, there's a very strong tie between diabetes incidence and language loss. The mechanism would be very interesting. An obvious theory I've heard is that it has something to do with cooking, that people lose their traditional recipes and switch to diets that put them at greater risk for metabolic illness. However, the most interesting theory I've heard in this study is that when a person feels excluded from their community, the body creates an inflammatory process that is very, very damaging to the metabolic system. And that there's actually a physical problem in the body that can happen when the language is lost. This is pretty well documented science and a very interesting phenomenon that needs to be explored more. To make a long story short, this is not all just in your head. These are real processes in the body that happen when languages are lost. Possibly. Binge drinking and alcohol use disorder. A lot of studies, young people who live in places where the language is lost report binge drinking more. We're in a part of the world where this is also a public health issue that's well known and pretty well documented. So I think this is an important issue for this part of the world, the tie between alcohol use disorder and language loss. And what I would propose is there's a direct link and a tie, and even a casual association, which means that language loss is causing the alcohol use disorder and not merely associated with it. That would require more study, but in my opinion, that is where the data are pointing, hard scientific data. And this data is from Australia. Assault rates, interestingly, also go up when languages are lost. People who don't speak their heritage language are more likely to be assaulted, according to some studies coming out of Australia. Also, there's a link in some studies between suicide rates and language loss. One study coming out of Canada had very, very dramatic results in that in communities where the indigenous and heritage language was not spoken, the youth suicide rate was up to 6 times higher. That's not a typo, it's like 600% higher. So language loss definitely has real-world implications in terms of mortality and suicidality. So this is, I would propose, a very, very serious issue and not just a Mickey Mouse thing. So that was enough maybe of the negativity and the pain. We can talk about the gain now. The good news in all this is if you decide to learn your heritage language, even if you were not taught it, even if it was not passed down to you, when that happens, people's health does tend to improve. So learning your indigenous heritage language is good for your health, so to speak. That's not a medical claim. I'm just saying that there is scientific research out there that's published that shows a positive correlation between language reacquisition or language reclamation and health outcomes. It's good for you to learn your language. Rusyn is good for you. And now I'm going to talk about our project to use artificial intelligence to create text in Lemko that's going to allow you guys to write in Rusyn today. You guys are all going to be writing in Rusyn. This language that we're revitalizing here is called Lemko in Poland. So here in Slovakia, the term Rusyn is used more, and in Poland they're going to use the word Lemko. I believe generally they're talking about the same language. That's debatable, but we're going to be using the word Lemko here in these slides. So Lemko is a definitively to severely endangered language, which means it's on the verge of being one of the statistics. A lot of scholars will talk about some close old roots in the southwestern Ukrainian branch. We're not going to go into that today, but it has something maybe in common with southwestern Ukrainian dialects, but that's not the topic of our conversation. This language is indigenous to Poland and Slovakia, so we're talking about indigenous languages here. I'd like to, sometimes I don't hear the word indigenous in the European context very much, and I think that's a shame. I think there are indigenous languages in Europe, and we need to work to revitalize them. Okay. So let's talk about the materials that we're using here. These artificial intelligence methods require enormous amounts of data. And data. That's why Google is always asking you for your consent, right, for your data. We just need tons and tons of data for AI to work the way it does. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I've developed a bilingual corpus, which basically means we've got text, tons and tons of text in Rusyn and in Lemko, and we also have it in English. And so I'm using that to train our models. I also translate this stuff into Polish and into Slovak. So we've got a bilingual corpus, and we started out with about 70,000 words, and now we're up to about 1 million words. So we've got a pretty hefty corpus, but we still need much more data. In computer science, we're always going to talk about sources of truth, which means how do we know what's true and what's not? And at some point, we just have to pick an authoritative source and say, okay, this is the truth. Some things are subjective. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but for when we train our data, when we train our models, we need to just pick something and say, this is the truth, and we're going to work with it. So we've got some good dictionaries in Poland. We've got the Lemko Polish dictionary. There's also a Lemko Ukrainian dictionary out there. There's a new dictionary out last month by Dr. Olena Duch-Pfeiffer in Poland. There's also some dictionaries here. I think it's Kercha is the main dictionary that people use, but that's kind of more optimized, I believe, for the Uzhhorod area and not Slovakia. So my dream would be to have an English Rusyn dictionary for Slovakia that's digitized. Those do exist, but we need them in digital format to really, really leverage them. Grammars also are going to be very important. When we talk about the codification of Rusyn, for example, it was important that the official grammar was written and published in the 1990s, and then we can refer to that. Because at some point we just have to pick a standard, some spelling rules, and stick to it if we want to get good results with AI. So in Poland, that grammar is called, it's by Chomiak and Fotański and Pirte, and here in Slovakia, it's going to be by Anna Pliskova. She's written a lot of good codifications and grammars that really, really help us out with this effort. And methods. So the technology we're using here is called neural machine translation. If you guys ever text somebody and your phone will kind of suggest the next word in the sequence to you, that's from sequence to sequence artificial intelligence. And that's what we're using here. So the first sequence is the stuff, for example, in English. And then the next part of the sequence that it's going to predict is going to be in Rusyn. I've also been doing a lot of stuff with what we call hybrid artificial intelligence and rule-based systems, which is where we use logic coded in Python to translate between, say, Rusyn and standard Ukrainian, and use that to create tons and tons and tons of data that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. This is called transfer learning because Rusyn is a very low resource language. And so we want to borrow the resources of higher resource neighbors. So Slovakia is also, I would say, a low resource language, but it has much more resources than Rusyn does. So we want to use as much stuff in Slovak as we can. We want to use as much stuff in Polish as we can. We want to use whatever we can get. And we're going to use rule-based machine translation to do that, generally coded in Python. I'm a test-driven development fanatic, so what I like to do is have the tests that say, I want X to translate to Y from the dictionary, and then it'll pass the test. And eventually I get 10,000 tests, and I know that the code is always translating things right because I run the test suite every time I save everything. So yeah, we were at 9,518 quality assurance tests. What I'd like to do moving forward is take the codification by Pliskova, for example, and write unit tests, like Russian, right? They're different things. However, the Rusyn community in the United States for a while, for a lot of complicated reasons, only had Russian textbooks. And as you can see, this language spoken in Moscow is really not close at all to Rusyn. Belarusian from Belarus is also quite far apart. Polish is going to be a lot closer. And for whatever reason, I don't even know if it's significant, Ukrainian was a little closer here. But you've got a big gap here between these other languages and Rusyn. So I just wanted to highlight that you can't use standard Ukrainian and expect good results in these communities, and even Polish is a lot different, and certainly Russian is very, very, very different. There was this folk belief in the community that somehow Ukrainian was really, really different from Rusyn, and that Moscow Russian was somehow closer. I just wanted to put out there that that's not true, that this has nothing to do with standard Russian. That's really not going to help. Although unfortunately at that time in the United States, the only textbooks available were standard Russian textbooks. So was it better than nothing? Yeah, I mean, people learn Cyrillic, but I don't want to dwell on that. Okay, so here's some examples of our output here. So we're looking at the truth, and we picked a native speaker that was interviewed, and we just picked her as the source of truth. That this is what the Rusyn is supposed to look like. And you've got the transliteration here into Latin alphabet. And then here is the system that we're using. And we've got the blue score. So for the reference, it's going to be 100. Our translation got to 58. And then Google Translate is all the way here down at 4.41. So this is only 4% like that. This is 60% like that. So that's a pretty good result. And of course, everyone's going to speak this language differently, so we can't always expect 100, right? Two different ways of saying something in the same language can be correct. So 100 is a very poor standard because it's impossible to achieve in the field. So generally with the blue score, we want to see about 30. 30 is considered human quality. I did these translations, this experiment on myself. I locked myself in a room, cut the internet, no dictionaries, nothing. I set myself a timer, and I translated by hand, and I scored about 27. So that was me, I was 27, so anything above that is superhuman quality, I would say. Of course, these are kind of relative metrics, so you're going to want to score them each time. You can't say 30 in one experiment is equal to 30 in another. You have to run it for every experiment. And then discussion points. I think you guys might have some questions yourself. So the idea is, should we continue in this direction of coupling morphologically and syntactically informed generators to neural engines. I think, yeah, it's a good way to do it. We can artificially make Czech and Slovak and Polish look like Rus and then use that in our training data and get good results. We can also use this rule-based stuff to ensure compliance with the rules. It's very important, I think, for the community here that Rusyn was codified in the 90s, and we want to ensure compliance with that. And we can use natural language processing, Python logic to ensure that compliance. And that's where I think we can add a lot of value by not just creating the AI model and calling it a day. We can really add value by ensuring compliance with the official grammars of Plišková in Slovakia and Fotański and Homiak in Poland. So sometimes you're going to have, in our community in the United States, there was a lot of Russian textbooks, like I said, that's all people had access to. So if you look at our newspapers and stuff, it's just full of Moscow Russian words. And we can use, but we're going to translate from English into Rusyn right now. So pretend if you never spoke your language before, let's go to Euronews. So you know I'm not cheating, we're going to pick a news article from right now. Just in, where is the article? Diplomat skips EU meeting, gone from public view. Okay, let's try it. That sounds interesting. Okay, so just a few minutes ago on Euronews, while I was giving this was published. And we're going to, if I can figure out how to, there we go. We're going to copy this. Okay. And then go back to the translator, paste it in. If I can figure out how to use it. Where is the article? Copy, okay. And we're going to paste it in. And now it's translating from English into Rusyn for Slovakia. Here at the bottom, you've got using the Latin alphabet, and here you've got the Cyrillic alphabet. Except for some reason it's in the Polish alphabet there. Okay. So, prosím čítať.
Sviatok bude propušťatý budúci týždeň Rada EU pro zahraniční díla po skončeniu výborového konania Orbánovej vlády.
Thank you. Rusyn speakers, how does that sound to you? Good? It's okay. Not perfect. Perfect is not my standard here. My standard here for now is good enough. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak Rusyn right now? Yeah? What would you like? What would you like to say?
Racist?
So, could you speak Rusyn, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, how about I have an idea. Let's say what you want to say in English, and you say it in Rusyn, and then we put it in here, and we see if it's close or not. No? No? Okay. What languages do you speak? Russian? Okay. Any others? You speak Rusyn and Ukrainian, yeah? Okay. Because this, I wanted to show you guys, this will translate from standard Ukrainian as well. So, but I don't know where the Cyrillic keyboard is on his, so I don't know. Do you have a Cyrillic keyboard? We can do it later, I don't think. Anyone else want to speak Rusyn? Something simple. No?
I can try some.
Yeah, let's try with you, sure. you want me to put it in first, or are you going to put it in first? Speak first, and then we'll compare.
Yeah. Oh, can I type something?
Absolutely, yeah. Yes.
Já to bude púšťať, budú tiež vyrazať pro zahraniční díla po skončení parovolku na moje vlády. Protivostojí to oficiálním položením.
Ale najdôležité pro nás azbuka a latinika.
Tak, tu je latinika a tu je azbuka.
Pro koho čo je lepšie? To azbuku neovládajú, ťažko počítať. Pro našu rusínsku jazyku lepšie je pročítať po česku.
Tu je lepšie, tak?
No jasne. To neovládať perfektnou azbuku. Kolega ovládať perfekt azbuku. Ja poslabšie. Ale pročítam.
No tak, to je tak, s latinským alfabetom bolo to také lepšie ľuďom tu čítať, tak? Ľudí tu nie... Tak. So, yeah, I think everyone here can read this. It's not, I know the alphabet's a little messed up, I need to fix that, but here we go. Čítajte, prosím.
Moje meno je Matúš, pochodžím zo Slovakie, jem študent na univerzity, absolvujem Todrik.
Close enough? Close enough. So we're going not for perfect, but for good enough. Okay. So you all can go to Translator.com and start speaking Rusyn right now. Yes?
But the result is not have on Russia's words. It's only or Slovak language or Belarusian language or Ukrainian, but it not have any Russian words. Is this a problem or not?
He's looking
Result in Russian language.
here?
Down.
Here. Okay, so this is the Cyrillic transliteration. So the Rusyn language, like officially, is using the Cyrillic alphabet, and we have the transliteration into the Cyrillic. So like our newspapers and our media are all like in Cyrillic. So the normal people, I think they use every day, they use the Latin, but like for literature, we try, I think, to use Cyrillic as much as possible. Yeah, we use Cyrillic when we're typing with each other. Yeah, but a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't know Cyrillic in this country. They know Rusyn, but they don't know Cyrillic. So yeah, I'm trying to give people the option for both, yeah? And then you can copy this and paste it in the chat. That's a good question, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much
My pleasure.
for awesome presentation. Big applause for Peter. Right now it's time for questions. If you have some, you can ask.
I have a question.
Yes?
This is exclusively for the Rusyn, but could the technology and the process be used to translate other minority languages?
Absolutely. This process can be used to translate other minority languages. The process I've come up with is based on, I talked with Matúš about this, like fine-tuning an existing model. So for this, I fine-tuned, I believe, a Czech model, Slovak model to translate into Rusyn. So this process can work if the minority language has a higher resource language that's related to it, for example.
Yes. I am a podkarpacki Niemiec, so I don't speak my minority language, but I understand it.
Yeah.
And we are like 1,000 people that can actually use the minority language.
Yeah.
And so there is not really that much material written or spoken that's left that could be used to train the model. So basically you could take a German model, maybe a Slovak model, because the language was influenced by Slovak a lot.
Yeah.
And you could theoretically take those models and fine-tune them to the minority language.
Right. Right, so you could take a standard German model, and if you've got, do you know how many words you have of text available?
I have no idea, but very little. Some poems, maybe some
Oh, wow.
2 or 3 books, and a dictionary.
Wow. Yeah, you could try that fine-tuning approach, or I think maybe a rule-based approach might help as well. Very interesting. Because it's like it's its own like dialect of German, right? It sounds like.
Yes, all to German, but it was influenced enough by the local language that it's not really comparable anymore to what it used to be.
You know, this is a fascinating topic, and it's cool to use this blue score to see, okay, if I use the Czech model, do I get better Rusyn? If I use the Polish one, do I get better Rusyn? If I use the Ukrainian one, do I get better Rusyn? And see which model to fine-tune to get the closer result. In fact, I got some weird results like the Polish Rusyn closer to Slovak than it was to Polish. So that's something to investigate. But it's really interesting to do these experiments. I'd be curious to see if these this German language for Slovakia is closer to Slovak or German syntactically. That would be interesting. Thank you for the question. Yes.
Ask a question about the introduction of your presentation, where there were some claims about the prevalence of problems like diabetes and drug or alcohol abuse in correlation with the indigenous languages.
Yes.
But what I thought about is that these languages are mostly spoken in communities that are actually different from the minority, from the main population. I mean that they often live without, for example, alcohol or bad food and so on, in many cases. And if this is not the case, that the prevalence is lower in these communities, not the loss of the language as is, but that they are just outside the community that is living different life.
That's a very interesting question. So the question is the better health outcomes among people who keep their language due to their isolation, yeah? They're isolated from access to illegal drugs, for example. There's no drug dealers in the area. There's not as much access to alcohol or money to buy it, or they're just further away from it. They're further away from the cities where a lot of bad habits are more common, I'll put it that way. I believe the study I read, they did compare. In English, we say you don't compare apples to oranges, right? You can't compare a family in a city and a family like in a village that's isolated in the mountains because they have two different lifestyles. And I agree with that, absolutely. So for this study, I do believe they took one settlement that was an isolated indigenous settlement and another isolated indigenous settlement. And they say all things being equal, the only difference is the language being kept or not. What are the health outcomes in terms of alcohol use disorder, diabetes, suicide, for example? So I believe the study is to control for that. Otherwise, it would not be good science, right?
Okay, thank you for your clarification.
My pleasure. Thank you for your good question. Appreciate it.
I would like to ask if there were some words that were not present in the dictionary, like in the codified part of the language from the dictionaries, but were present in like other data sources, like transcriptions from speech of the speakers and from the literature.
Absolutely. In fact, a huge difference. And we're at an interesting part here because when I look at the data from the codified sources written by people who are educated in the language, they often use completely different words than when they did the interview and transcribed the interview. And the scores are much different. And we're at it's a good question. Do we go what the people are actually speaking in the villages? Like in Poland, it might be closer to Poland. In Slovakia, closer to Slovak. Or do we go with what our codification says and our elites say and our literature says? And it's almost like a different language. And it's might be important to support both, especially from translating out of Rusyn. And it's an important question when we translate into Rusyn. Are we going to talk with how the people talk or talk how they should talk? And that is a question for us, for you guys, for the community to decide. Maybe we could do both. We could do like a literary Rusyn engine and a colloquial Rusyn engine, and they could be two different registers. Absolutely. Great point.
I have a question.
Yes.
That low resource languages are not developed as biggest languages like English, German, or Italian. And I'm just interested in what about generating new words? Would be it possible, if we have the core words in the language, and the language is not developed. We don't have the variations of some words.
Mm-hmm.
Can we use this kind of software also for generating new words, which can be, for example, some combination of some existing words, which can be really good alternative, for example, and it can help linguists in that way.
This is a great question. And it comes to the core of what we call like overtraining in machine learning here. So if we start off with the Slovak model, and we translate it, we train it to speak Rusyn. At some point I have a problem where I overtrain it, and it doesn't have words for like when I'm trying to translate my slides for like the important scientific words. But the Slovak word, I know people will understand, and if I can make it look Rusyn, it'll be perfect for the situation and communicative. So I think it's important in our data set when we're scoring our data and how good the translation is to not overtrain and to let the model kind of Rusynize Slovak a little bit, enough to make that kind of communication possible. Because we're not going to have every word in our data set. We're a low resource language. So I think not overtraining or even undertraining a little bit could help with that, and it's an important problem. And maybe there are other solutions we're not seeing, like some kind of dictionary.
A language basically changes, and did you have the problem that you basically tried to teach the model some Rusyn from some country, but it was so different from the other Rusyns that it basically was difficult or impossible to implement?
Yeah, I'm kind of a purist about that. I was very clear, like when I went through the corpus, throwing out stuff. I did like some Python scripts to like look for old Church Slavonic stuff. Like there was a lot of, the Bible. Like, someone would like put something from the Bible in there, like a church reading, which is cool, but like I don't want it in the Rusyn corpus because it's going to produce old Church Slavonic and not Rusyn, which is not what I'm trying to accomplish. Especially with religious texts, that was a problem, yeah.
Yes, I would mention Old Slavic, Latin, for example, if the Soviets would have the Russian, something like that.
And ironically, the Russian I had to get rid of Russian from the corpus as well, and it was usually coming from the United States. Because the Rusyns were writing in Russian in the United States, and the newspapers, and someone was like quoting it. This is what the Americans wrote in 1935 about America, and it's interesting, but it's in Russian, it's in Moscow Russian. And so, yeah, it's out. Yeah, I wrote scripts like with a Russian word, like the most common Russian words, and I would just throw out the whole paragraph if I found something I thought was impure, which is a little fanatical, but it works. Excellent question. With the German, that's going to be interesting, because, yeah.
I think it will be basically impossible with so little literary sources.
Maybe if you know some rules. Because it is really close to German, if you know some rules.
It's not
rule-based approach.
The problem, the language basically.
If there is if there is some book of some basic grammar, you can just change.
Yep.
Little bit German. I'm not sure if this kind of approach.
I think a hybrid approach would be good. Do both. Try both. Do one before the other, and then do the other one before the other, and just whatever gets that blue score higher. Just got to fight to get that blue score up. At first, it's going to be like nothing, like really low. Like when I started, this was at 6, and now I'm up to like 30. But it took 5 years. But it's definitely worth it. I'd be happy to help and work together.
That's a lot of work.
Maybe the speech of the users of the language should be transcribed to increase the amount of the data and get rid of the loan words, because maybe each person may forget different words. They may have different loan words, and maybe there is some like intersections of.
Yes, but that is the problem, that basically there's maybe 5 or so villages that speak the dialect, you could say, and there isn't really enough sources to differentiate what the loan words are and what the original words are, because basically, like I said, the Christian texts were added over time. Slovak was added, German was added, Russian was added, Latin was added, and it's difficult to say what is original and what was basically added over time.
Right, right. I mean, at some point too, the borrowings become part of the language.
Yes.
Like a bards in our language, yeah? It's from Polish. I think it's borrowed from Polish bardzo, but proszę bards is like very normal Rusyn, at least in Poland. So we have a lot of borrowings that are so old, they're Rusyn, I would say. Maybe the recent borrowings we want to get rid of, but not the old ones.
Yes.
Okay, I think we are running out of time
Okay.
right now. Peter, thank you very much
My
for
pleasure.
coming, for awesome presentation.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for you all that you came here. I think that low resource language topic is really hot across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dziękuję.